Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a moment and just talk to you about what's going on this weekend at Hillside. It's not what we had planned. We had planned for this weekend to be our 40th anniversary celebration, and obviously we're not able to do that. And yet we still believe God has really exciting things in store for us. As I sit here in front of pictures from our 40-year history, and I'm just reminded of story after story of God's faithfulness in these 40 years. So many men and women, girls and boys have experienced God's hope. They've experienced His transformation, and we're so incredibly grateful for all that God has done. And we're so excited about all that God desires to do in the future. The other day, I was having a time in Scripture early in the morning, and I was reading through Joshua, and I had read Joshua chapter 4, where there's this amazing deliverance as the Jordan River stops. And Joshua leads the children of Israel across dry ground, miraculously, in sort of a replay of the parting of the Red Sea. And Joshua leads the children of Israel into the promised land that God had told them that He was going to lead them to. But for 40 years, they wandered around in the wilderness, and they experienced difficult days, and yet they also experienced God's provision. He fed them, He clothed them, their clothes, their shoes never wore out, and manna from heaven fell every single day to feed them. Then you get to Joshua chapter 5, and verse 11 talks about the day after Passover. And it says that very day that they entered into the promised land, they ate from the fruit of that land. If you remember, the promise was this would be a land that flows with milk and honey, the promised land. It would be a land where the grapes were the size of like watermelons. It would be amazing. And that very day, the manna stopped, and they ate from the fruit of the land. And I read that, and I thought, I've read this so many times. And yet, in a new way, God was speaking that very day. Meaning, for 40 years, God had been faithful every step of the way. For 40 years, God had fed them day after day. And the very day they entered into the promised land, that season was finished. That very day, manna no longer came because they had fresh fruit. It was a new season. God was doing a new thing. And God was telling them, don't look back, but look ahead. Don't get caught up in what has been, but look to what will be. And so it continues. And Joshua is in Jericho. He looks up. He sees a man standing in front of him with a sword in his hand. And Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" And I thought, that sounds like 2020. That sounds like this day and age where everybody's taking a side and everybody's like, are you on my side or are you on their side? And everybody's trying to get everybody to pick a side. And Joshua says to this man with a sword, are you on our side or are you on our enemy's side? And I love the response. Neither, he replied. But as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. Joshua fell face down on the ground in reverence and asked him, what message does my Lord have for his servant? The commander of the Lord's army replied, take off your sandals, for the place you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. You see, we're living in a time as a church where we've seen God's faithfulness for 40 years, and now we're looking into the future and hoping and praying for God's faithfulness. Joshua had seen God's deliverance through the Jordan River, and in the very next chapter, the walls of Jericho fall down and victory is on its way. But in the meantime, there's a moment where Joshua's initial response to this man, who it turns out is an Old Testament appearance of Jesus, and his first response, whose side are you on? Ours or theirs? And I love the response. In Hebrew, I think it's technically no. And what he's saying is you're asking the wrong question of the wrong person. You're focused on the wrong thing. Here's the question. Whose side are you on? And God invites us to be a part of His will, His kingdom in this world. And the pictures behind me represent 40 years of a church trying to align itself with God and His will through various seasons. And here we are in a moment right now, believing God is not finished in some ways. He's just getting started. And we're so excited about the future, even if we're in the midst of difficult days now. And on the weekends, we've been in a series called One Story at a Time, where we believe we're being invited by God to experience His love in radical ways, to grow in community with each other in ways that transform our lives, and to serve with compassion those who don't know Jesus, those who in this moment aren't experiencing His hope, and those who are hurting in life. And we need to be the kind of people with eyes to see where Jesus is leading us. So this week, I want to invite you to come join us as we wrap up this series, One Story at a Time, and we invite each other to join God in His work. He's faithful, and He always has been. He always will be. I'm so excited about what God is up to, and I can't wait to be with you soon.